South Korea is known for K-pop, cutting-edge technology, and neon-lit cities that never sleep. But venture beyond Seoul's skyscrapers and Busan's beaches, you'll find small towns wrapped in silence, carrying secrets the tourism brochures will never mention. These aren't ghost stories or urban legends. These are real places where tragedy struck, where history left scars, and where the past refuses to stay buried. From islands that served as leper colonies to villages swallowed by industrial disasters, South Korea's countryside hides chapters of suffering, betrayal, and loss that most people will never hear about. Places that look peaceful on the surface but hold darkness just beneath. Some of these stories will shock you, others will haunt you. All of them are true. Let's step beyond the postcard image and uncover South Korea's quiet towns with dark secrets. Sorokdo Island. Sorokdo Island is located off the southern coast of South Korea in South Jeolla Province, connected to the mainland by a narrow bridge. Home to fewer than 600 residents today, this small island was once one of Asia's largest leper colonies, established in 1916 during Japanese colonial rule. For decades, patients with Hansen's disease were forcibly taken from their families and confined here under brutal conditions. They were subjected to forced sterilizations, hard labor, and abuse by Japanese administrators who treated them as subhuman. Many were never allowed to leave, even after effective treatments became available. The island's dark legacy includes mass graves and stories of patients who attempted escape, only to drown in the surrounding waters. Today, Sorokdo hosts a Hansen's disease museum and memorial sites, but the trauma lingers. The quiet, tree-lined paths and ocean views mask a history of medical apartheid and human rights violations that South Korea is still reckoning with. Gunsan. Gunsan is a coastal city in North Jeolla Province, with a population of around 270,000, located along the Yellow Sea. Known historically as a major port during Japanese occupation, Gunsan still contains colonial-era architecture and warehouses that attract history tourists. But the city's dark secret lies in its role as a hub for rice extraction. Korean-grown rice was forcibly shipped to Japan during the occupation, leaving local populations to starve. Thousands of Koreans suffered malnutrition and death while their own harvests fed the empire. Gunsan also housed Japanese military installations and later became a site of political imprisonment during South Korea's authoritarian era in the 1970s and 80s. Activists and dissidents were tortured in facilities hidden within the city. Today, Gunsan struggles economically with shuttered factories and a declining population. The cheerful retro cafes and renovated Japanese homes can't fully erase the exploitation and suffering embedded in the city's foundations. Hapcheon. Hapcheon is a rural county in South Gyeongsang Province, with a population of approximately 45,000, surrounded by mountains and known for Hyeonsa Temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But Hapcheon also carries the weight of the Korean War's darkest chapter, the Hapcheon Massacre. In 1951, South Korean forces, fearing communist infiltration, rounded up hundreds of civilians suspected of leftist sympathies and executed them without trial. Entire families were killed, including women, children, and the elderly. Bodies were dumped in mass graves that weren't officially acknowledged until decades later. The truth was suppressed by successive South Korean governments until survivors and families began demanding justice in the 1990s. Memorials now stand in the county, but many victims remain unidentified. Hapcheon's peaceful mountain scenery belies the blood-soaked soil beneath it. The temple may symbolize enlightenment, but the surrounding hills still echo with the unresolved grief of a community torn apart by ideology and fear. Geoje Island. Geoje Island, located off South Gyeongsang Province's southern coast, is South Korea's second-largest island with a population of around 250,000. It's known today for shipbuilding, scenic coastlines, and the annual Okpo Festival. But during the Korean War, Geoje became home to the largest prisoner of war camp in the conflict, holding over 170,000 Chinese and North Korean soldiers. Conditions were brutal. Overcrowding, disease, starvation, and violent uprisings plagued the camp. Riots broke out between communist and anti-communist prisoners, leading to murders, torture, and chaos within the fences. Thousands died from neglect and violence. The camp also became a Cold War propaganda battleground, with both sides exploiting prisoners for ideological gain. When the war ended, many POWs chose not to return home, fearing persecution. Geoje's POW Camp Museum tells part of the story, but the island's rocky shores and shipyards now sit atop the unmarked suffering of men caught between two brutal regimes. Namyangju. Namyangju is a city in Gyeonggi Province, just east of Seoul, with a population of roughly 730,000. It's known for its riversides, parks, and proximity to the capital, making it a suburban retreat for commuters. But Namyangju also conceals the site of the Masuk Massacre, a lesser-known atrocity from the Korean War. In late 1950, South Korean police and military forces executed hundreds of suspected communist sympathizers in the Maseok area without trial. Men, women, and entire families were tied together and shot, their bodies thrown into hastily dug trenches. The killings were part of a broader wave of anti-leftist purges carried out under the guise of national security. For decades, survivors lived in fear and silence, unable to speak publicly about what happened. Only in recent years have truth commissions begun unearthing the mass graves and acknowledging the victims. Namyangju's modern apartments and riverside cafes now stand just miles from these killing fields, where memory struggles to break through the silence. Ulsan Onsan District. Ulsan is South Korea's 7th largest city, located on the southeastern coast with a population exceeding 1.1 million. Known as the industrial heart of the nation, it's home to Hyundai's massive shipyards and automotive plants. But in the 1980s, the Onsan district of Ulsan became infamous for a health disaster dubbed Onsan illness. Residents near petrochemical factories began suffering mysterious symptoms: severe pain, skin discoloration, respiratory failure, and neurological disorders. Children were born with deformities. The cause was heavy metal poisoning from unchecked industrial pollution, including cadmium, lead, and mercury. The government and corporations initially denied responsibility, leaving victims to suffer in silence for years. Only after prolonged activism and media exposure were residents relocated and compensated, though many were left permanently disabled. Onsan became a symbol of South Korea's dark side of rapid industrialization. Economic growth built on the poisoned bodies of the poor. Today, the district has been cleaned up, but the scars remain. Gwangju. Gwangju is the 6th largest city in South Korea, located in South Jeolla Province, with a population of around 1.5 million. It's celebrated as the birthplace of Korean democracy and known for its vibrant art scene and cuisine. But Gwangju's name is forever linked to the May 18th Democratic Uprising of 1980. After a military coup, citizens took to the streets demanding democracy. The authoritarian government responded with brutal force. Paratroopers beat, shot, and bayoneted protesters, including students and civilians. Over 9 days, hundreds were killed and thousands injured. Bodies were hidden, records destroyed, and survivors silenced. The massacre was covered up for years, with the state-controlled media blaming communist rioters. Only after South Korea's democratization in the late 1980s was the truth acknowledged. Gwangju now hosts memorials, a national cemetery, and annual commemorations. But the trauma runs deep, and the city remains a symbol of both resistance and the horrifying cost of authoritarianism. Miryang. Miryang is a small city in South Gyeongsang Province, with a population of roughly 105,000, known for its hot springs, historic temples, and the scenic Yeongnam-nu Pavilion. But in 2004, Miryang became synonymous with one of South Korea's most disturbing sexual violence cases. Over the course of a year, a group of high school boys systematically raped and assaulted multiple female classmates, some as young as 13. The abuse involved over 40 perpetrators and at least 10 victims. What made it darker was the community's response. Victims were blamed, ostracized and forced to leave town, while many perpetrators faced little to no punishment due to their age. The case exposed deep-rooted misogyny, victim-blaming culture, and failures in South Korea's justice system. It sparked nationwide outrage and eventually led to legal reforms. But for the survivors, Miryang remains a place of unhealed trauma. The city's peaceful exterior hides a wound that never fully closed, and a silence that still protects the guilty. Hwaseong. Hwaseong is a rapidly growing city in Gyeonggi Province, with a population exceeding 900,000, located south of Seoul. It's known for its UNESCO-listed fortress and proximity to major industrial parks. But between 1986 and 1991, Hwaseong was terrorized by South Korea's first known serial killer, responsible for at least 10 brutal murders of women and girls. The Hwaseong serial murders involved rape, strangulation, and mutilation, spreading fear across rural villages. Despite a massive investigation and over 2 million officers deployed, the killer was never caught until 2019, when DNA evidence finally identified a man already serving a life sentence for another murder. By then, the statute of limitations had expired, meaning he could never be prosecuted for the Hwaseong crimes. The case haunted South Korea for decades, inspiring the acclaimed film Memories of Murder. Hwaseong has since urbanized and modernized, but older residents still remember the terror, and the victims' families still carry the weight of justice denied. Gyeongseong. Gyeongseong is a quiet rural county in South Jeolla Province, with a population of around 45,000, known for its forests, lakes, and traditional Korean medicine. But Gyeongseong hides a chilling institutional abuse scandal that came to light in the 2000s. For years, a state-funded welfare facility for people with disabilities and the homeless operated as a virtual prison. Residents were beaten, sexually abused, forced into labor, and denied basic human rights. Some were held against their will for decades. Staff embezzled government funds while victims lived in squalor. Many died under suspicious circumstances. The abuse was enabled by negligence from local officials and a society that marginalized the vulnerable. When the truth emerged, it shocked the nation and led to legal reforms, but justice for survivors was slow and incomplete. Gyeongseong's green hills and serene lakes now stand in stark contrast to the darkness that unfolded behind closed doors. The facility has since shut down, but the betrayal lingers in the community's memory. Buyeo. Buyeo is a small county in South Chungcheong Province, with a population of around 70,000, known as the final capital of the ancient Baekje Kingdom, and home to numerous archaeological sites and UNESCO heritage landmarks. But Buyeo also holds a tragic wartime memory tied to the Baekje Cliff, or Nakwam. According to historical accounts, when Baekje fell to Silla and Tang Chinese forces in 660 AD, thousands of courtwomen and nobles threw themselves off this cliff into the river below, rather than face capture, slavery, or dishonor. Known as the Rock of the Falling Flowers, it symbolizes mass suicide driven by desperation and invasion. While romanticized in Korean folklore, the event represents a horrifying loss of life and the collapse of a kingdom. Today, Nakwam is a popular tourist site with pavilions and scenic overlooks, but it remains a place of collective grief. Buyeo's picturesque riverside and ancient ruins can't erase the specter of thousands leaping to their deaths in an act of final resistance. Ulsan. Ulsan is a city in North Jeolla Province, with a population of around 280,000, known for its historical significance as part of the ancient Baekje Kingdom and its agricultural output. But Ulsan also harbors a darker modern legacy tied to labor exploitation and corruption. In the 1980s and 90s, the city was home to numerous textile and manufacturing factories, employing young women, often from rural areas, under exploitative conditions. Workers faced long hours, low wages, sexual harassment, and unsafe environments. Many lived in cramped factory dormitories with little freedom. Protests were met with violence, and labor organizers were arrested or blacklisted. The exploitation mirrored South Korea's larger pattern of sacrificing worker rights for rapid economic development. While Ulsan has since shifted toward technology and services, the stories of those women, many now elderly, are rarely told. The city's modern infrastructure and historic sites overshadow the sweatshops and suffering that fueled its growth. Ulsan's silence on this chapter speaks volumes about whose stories get remembered. And if you think South Korea's quiet towns are hiding unsettling truths beneath their calm streets, wait until you see what's happening much closer to home. Because some American cities come with warnings no relocation guide will ever tell you. The darkest cities to relocate in America, and discover the places people are fleeing before you decide where you'd live next. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and step into the hidden side of the world with Oddly Abroad.